The galactic oldest species avoids Earth because Earth holds a darker secret. The Great Hall of the Varanthi Council stretched for miles in every direction. Its walls were made of crystal grown over billions of years. Light from distant stars passed through the ceiling and painted patterns on the floor that told the history of the universe itself. The Sikh stood at the center of the hall and tried not to tremble. He was young for a Korvani, barely 300 years old. His scales were still bright green, and his tail twitched with nervous energy. Around him sat the Council of Elders, the ruling body of the Varanthi species. The Varanthi were the oldest living species in the known galaxy. They had watched stars being born. They had seen civilizations rise and fall like waves on a beach. Their bodies were tall and thin, almost like living shadows, and their eyes held the weight of time itself. Thesic had come to ask for something simple. He wanted permission to explore an uncharted system in the Orion arm of the galaxy. His research suggested it might contain valuable minerals and possibly even life. "You may present your petition," said Elder Voranth, the Speaker of the Council. His voice echoed through the chamber like wind through an empty canyon. Thesic activated his data display. A holographic map of the galaxy appeared above his head. He zoomed in on a small yellow star in the outer spiral arm. "Honored elders," he began, "I request permission to survey this system. Our long-range scans show 8 planets, including one in the habitable zone. The system has never been officially explored, and I believe—" He stopped speaking because something strange was happening. The Varanthi elders, beings who had witnessed the death of galaxies without changing expression, were reacting. Some leaned back in their seats. Others turned to whisper to their neighbors. Elder Voranth had gone completely still. "Show us the coordinates again," Voranth said quietly. Thesic displayed them. The numbers hung in the air like a death sentence. The silence that followed was the heaviest Thesic had ever experienced. He watched as elders who had lived for millions of years exchanged looks of what could only be described as fear. Then something happened that made Thesic's blood run cold. A door at the far end of the hall opened. Through it came a figure that Thesic had only heard about in legends. It was the first witness, the oldest living Varanthi, a being who had existed before the galaxy had finished forming. The first witness had not spoken to the council in 10,000 years. Most believed he had retreated so far into meditation that he had forgotten the physical world existed. But now he walked slowly toward the center of the chamber. His body was so old that it seemed made of darkness itself. When he reached Thesic, he looked at the holographic display with eyes that had seen everything. "That system," the first witness said, and his voice was like stones grinding together, "contains the world called Earth." Thesic did not recognize the name. He looked at Elder Voranth for explanation, but the speaker's face had gone pale. "I do not understand," Thesic said carefully. "Is this system already claimed by another species?" "It is not claimed," the first witness replied. "It is forbidden." The word hung in the air. In all of galactic history, the Varanthi had never formally forbidden anything. They were observers, not rulers. They believed in free exploration and the natural development of civilizations. "Forbidden by whom?" Thesic asked. "By us," the first witness said. "By the Varanthi. Earth is the only world we have ever removed from the navigation charts, the only world we have ever refused to visit, the only world we have ever feared." Thesic felt confusion replace his nervousness. The Varanthi feared nothing. They had survived the collapse of the first stars. They had outlived species that had conquered entire galaxy clusters. "What is on Earth that frightens you?" he asked. The first witness was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, almost sad. "We were there once," he said, "long before the creatures who now call it home had learned to walk upright. We found Earth when it was young, and we thought it would make a good colony. We were wrong. What happened? We woke something. Something that had been sleeping beneath the surface of that world since before the planet had cooled. Something that should not exist in a universe with physical laws." The first witness closed his ancient eyes. "We lost an entire generation trying to escape. Millions of Varanthi, gone in a matter of days. We fled and never returned." Thesic's mind struggled to process this information. But that was millions of years ago. Surely whatever was there has died by now. We thought so too, the first witness said. We watched from the edges of the system, expecting the planet to be consumed by what we had awakened. Instead, something unexpected happened. He waved one shadowy hand, and the holographic display changed. It now showed Earth as it appeared today, a blue and green world covered in clouds. Life continued on that planet, the first witness said. Not just continued, thrived. A species rose to dominance. They call themselves humans. They have now developed faster than light travel and are spreading into the galaxy. Then the danger has passed, Thesic said, feeling relief. Whatever you awakened must have died or gone back to sleep. The first witness turned to look at him with those impossibly old eyes. You do not understand, young one. The things we awakened do not die. They do not sleep in any way we comprehend. They are still there, beneath the surface of that world. We have detected their presence. They remain. Then how have the humans survived? The question seemed to cause the first witness physical pain. He turned away from Thesic and began walking back toward the door he had entered through. That, he said without looking back, is the question that has haunted us for 100,000 years. We do not avoid Earth because we fear what sleeps there. We avoid Earth because the humans did something to it. Something we cannot explain. Something that should have been impossible. He paused at the door. They did not flee or hide. They fought, and somehow, they won. That is why we will never return, because we do not understand what humanity truly is. And the Varanthi have learned, over billions of years, to fear what we cannot understand. The door closed behind him, and the chamber fell silent. Elder Voranth finally spoke. Your petition is denied, Thesic. The Earth system will remain forbidden. This council will not discuss the matter further. Thesic wanted to argue, but he saw the fear in the eyes of beings who had watched universes die. He bowed his head and prepared to leave. But as he walked out of the Great Hall, his mind was racing. The humans had joined the galactic community 5 years ago. They had established trade routes and diplomatic relations. They seemed friendly enough, if a bit strange by galactic standards. They had no idea that every ancient species in the galaxy gave them a wide berth. They did not know that their homeworld was marked on Varanthi charts with a symbol that meant absolute danger. They did not understand why older civilizations treated them with a mixture of respect and terror. Thesic had always thought humans were simply another young species finding their place in the cosmos. Now he wondered if the galaxy had it all wrong. Maybe humans were not the newcomers everyone assumed them to be. Maybe they had been fighting a war longer and more terrible than anyone knew. Maybe the reason they seemed so comfortable in the darkness of space was that they had already faced something far worse. He thought about the first witness's words. The humans fought, and somehow they won. What kind of species could defeat something that had scattered the oldest civilization in the galaxy? What kind of beings could make their home on a world that the Varanthi themselves called forbidden? As Thesic left the council hall, he made a decision. He would not go to Earth, but he would find a human and ask them questions. He would learn the truth about that strange blue world and the people who came from it. He did not know that his questions would change the galaxy forever. He did not know that the secret of Earth was darker and stranger than anyone had ever imagined. He did not know that humanity's greatest strength was not their technology or their determination. It was what they had learned to do in the dark places beneath their world, long before they ever looked up at the stars. The Varanthi had run from the darkness. The humans had done something else entirely, and soon the entire galaxy would learn what that something was. Ambassador Corinth had served the Varanthi High Council for 6,000 years. She had negotiated peace treaties between species that had been at war for millennia. She had witnessed the birth of new civilizations and the quiet death of old ones. Nothing in the galaxy surprised her anymore, until she received her new assignment. You want me to make contact with the humans, she said, reading the orders on her datapad for the third time. Official diplomatic contact. Elder Voranth nodded. His holographic image flickered slightly across the vast distance between them. The High Council has decided it is time. Humanity is expanding rapidly. We cannot avoid them forever. We have avoided them for 60 million years, Corinth pointed out. Why change now? Because now they are coming to us. Human ships have been detected near 3 of our outer territories. They are not hostile, but they are curious. They want to meet us. Vorinth paused. And we need to understand them. We need to know how they have survived so long on that world. Corinth understood what he was not saying. The secret of Earth had haunted the Varanthi since before recorded history. The first witness still woke screaming from nightmares about what they had found there. If humanity had somehow conquered the things that lurked beneath their planet, the Varanthi needed to know how. I accept the assignment, she said. 3 weeks later, Corinth's ship docked at Griffin Station, a human trading post at the edge of colonized space. The station was loud, crowded, and chaotic in ways that made her uncomfortable. Species from across the galaxy mixed with humans in the corridors, all of them talking, laughing, and arguing. But it was the humans themselves who unsettled her. Corinth had studied recordings of humans before arriving. She knew they were a mammalian species with bilateral symmetry, 2 eyes, and a range of skin colors. She knew they were social creatures who formed strong group bonds. She knew their average lifespan was only about 80 years, which was practically nothing by galactic standards. What the recordings had not prepared her for was the feeling she got when she looked into their eyes. There was something there. Something old. Something that had seen darkness and decided to stare back at it. She saw it in the way human security guards watch the shadows. She saw it in the way human children played without fear in corners that should have frightened them. She saw it in the calm way humans discuss traveling through the void of space, as if the endless black held no terror for them at all. Her first meeting was with Station Commander David Chen, a middle-aged human with gray hair and kind eyes. He welcomed her to Griffin Station with genuine warmth and offered her a tour. "We do not get many Varanthi visitors," he said as they walked through the station's commercial district. "In fact, I think you might be the first in living memory. Most species have at least a few tourists or traders who stop by, but your people seem to prefer keeping your distance." Corinth chose her words carefully. "The Varanthi are an old species. We are set in our ways." "Fair enough," Chen smiled. "Well, I hope you find humans interesting. We are a strange bunch, but we mean well." Over the next few days, Corinth immersed herself in human culture. She ate in their restaurants, watched their entertainment programs, and attended their social gatherings. She was looking for something, though she was not entirely sure what. She found it in their stories. Humans, she discovered, told stories constantly. They told stories to their children before sleep. They told stories in their religious ceremonies. They told stories in their art, in their music, in their literature. And so many of those stories were about the same thing: monsters. Every human culture had them. Creatures that lived in the dark. Beings that came from below the ground. Things with too many teeth, too many eyes, too many limbs. Creatures that could not be killed, only driven away. Creatures that feared light and fire and human courage. Corinth read these stories with growing unease. On most worlds, species develop fears of predators or natural disasters. Their mythologies reflected the real dangers of their environments. But human mythology was different. Humans told stories about things that should not exist. She found tales of beings that could change their shape, stories of creatures that fed on fear itself, legends of things that lived in the spaces between moments, waiting for someone to look away. Each culture had different names for them, different descriptions, but they all agreed on one thing. These creatures were real, and humans had been fighting them for as long as humans had existed. One evening, Corinth attended a human celebration called Halloween. Children dressed in costumes meant to represent frightening creatures. Adults told scary stories and decorated their homes with images of death and darkness. She watched a group of children run past her, laughing and screaming with mock terror. One of them, a small girl with red hair and bright eyes, stopped to look at Corinth with curiosity. "Are you an alien?" the girl asked. "Yes," Corinth said. "I am Varanthi." "Cool." The girl studied her with the fearless directness that humans seem to develop young. "My name is Emma. Are you scared of anything?" The question caught Corinth off guard. She thought about the first witness in his nightmares. She thought about the things that had driven her ancestors from Earth. She thought about 60 million years of fear. "Yes," she admitted. My people are scared of many things. That is okay, Emma said seriously. Everybody gets scared sometimes. But my grandma says the scary things went away a long time ago. Corinth felt her hearts beat faster. What scary things? The things that used to live under the ground. Emma shrugged as if this were common knowledge. Grandma says they were real, but humans made them go away. That is why we dress up like them on Halloween. To remember that we are not afraid anymore. Before Corinth could ask more questions, Emma's mother called her away. The little girl waved goodbye and ran off to join her friends, leaving Corinth standing alone in the crowd. She thought about what the child had said. Humans made them go away. That night, Corinth returned to her quarters and pulled up the oldest Varanthi historical records she had security clearance to access. She searched for any information about the Earth incident, the disaster that had caused her people to flee. She found a single entry, buried in files that had not been opened in millions of years. It was a sensor recording from the last Varanthi ship to escape Earth's orbit. The visual was corrupted, but the audio was clear. She heard screaming, commands being shouted in ancient Varanthi, the sound of weapons being fired, and beneath it all something else, a sound that made her blood run cold. It was not quite a voice and not quite a roar. It was something in between, something that should not have been able to make sound at all. The recording ended abruptly. The final entry in the log was simple. We are abandoning the colony. Whatever we awakened cannot be stopped. Earth is lost. But Earth was not lost. 60 million years later, humans walked on that planet. They built cities, they raised families, they laughed and loved and lived without fear. What had they done? How had they survived? Corinth thought about Emma's grandmother. She thought about the stories humans told their children. She thought about a species that had somehow transformed their terror into tradition, their nightmares into holidays. She needed to learn more. She needed to find a human who knew the old stories, the real stories, someone who could tell her what really happened in the dark places beneath the earth. She did not know that her search would lead her to secrets older than her own species. She did not know that the truth about humanity would change everything she believed about the galaxy. All she knew was that the first witness had been right to be afraid, not of what lurked beneath Earth, but of the species that had learned to make it afraid of them. The memory vaults of the Varanthi homeworld existed in a place that was not quite real. They had been built in a dimension adjacent to normal space, where time flowed differently and information could be stored for eternity. Only the oldest members of the species were permitted to enter. Corinth had been granted special access after submitting her preliminary report on humanity. The High Council wanted her to understand exactly what the Varanthi had encountered on Earth before she continued her investigation. They wanted her to see the forbidden memory. The first witness met her at the entrance to the vault. His ancient form seemed to shimmer in the strange light of this place. He looked at her with eyes that had witnessed the birth of stars. You have requested to see the memory of Earth, he said. I must warn you. What you will experience cannot be forgotten. It will stay with you forever. I need to understand, Corinth said. The humans are not what we thought they were. I need to know what they faced. The first witness nodded slowly. Then follow me. They walked through corridors of crystallized thought, past memories preserved from billions of years ago. Corinth saw glimpses of the early universe, of galaxies still forming, of the Varanthi's first steps into space. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Finally, they reached a door made of pure darkness. The first witness placed his hand against it, and it opened. This is the memory of Earth, he said. I was there. I was young then, barely 1,000 years old. I was part of the colonial expedition. I am the only survivor. Corinth stepped through the door, and suddenly she was somewhere else. She stood on the surface of a young planet. The sky was strange, a different color than it would become millions of years later. The air was thick and hot, full of volcanic gases. But the planet was alive with potential. Green things grew in the valleys. Water flowed in the rivers. It was beautiful. Around her, Varanthi colonists worked to establish their settlement. They built structures from local materials. They studied the native life forms. They were excited about this new world, full of hope for the future. Then the earthquakes started. At first, they thought it was natural geological activity. The planet was still young, still settling. But the earthquakes came in patterns that made no sense. They seemed to focus on the colony itself, as if something beneath the ground knew they were there. One night, a Varanthi scientist named Eloth reported an anomaly. Deep scans had detected something beneath the planet's crust. Something massive, something moving. Corinth watched through the memory as the colonists gathered to discuss the findings. The images showed a vast network of chambers beneath the surface, stretching across the entire planet. And in those chambers, things were stirring. We thought they were geological formations at first, the first witness's voice echoed through the memory. We were wrong. The first attack came without warning. The ground beneath the colony split open. From the crack rose something that Corinth's mind struggled to process. It was not quite solid and not quite liquid. It had shapes that changed every moment, forms that contradicted themselves. Where it touched the light itself seemed to scream. She watched Varanthi colonists try to flee. She watched weapons fire pass through the creature without effect. She watched as beings older than most civilizations were pulled into the darkness and simply ceased to exist. The memory shifted. Now she saw the survivors on ships, racing toward orbit. Below them, more fissures were opening. More of the things were rising. The entire planet seemed to be waking up. We called them the Beneath Ones, the first witness said, but that is not what they were. They had no name. They existed before names had meaning. They were things from the chaos that came before creation, remnants of an older universe where the laws of physics had not yet solidified. Earth was their prison, and we woke them. The memory showed the Varanthi fleet fleeing the system at maximum speed. Behind them, Earth was covered in darkness. The things rising from below had blotted out the continents themselves. We thought the planet would be consumed, the first witness continued. We thought nothing could survive what we had unleashed. For millions of years, we watched from the edges of the system, too afraid to approach. We expected to see a dead world. The memory shifted again. Now Corinth saw Earth as it appeared much later. The darkness was gone. The planet was blue and green again, and on its surface, primitive creatures walked on two legs. Humans, Corinth whispered. They should not have existed, the first witness said. Nothing should have survived the Beneath Ones, but the humans were there, living, thriving, and the Beneath Ones were no longer visible. What happened? Did the creatures leave? No. The first witness's voice was heavy with something like awe. We could still detect them. They were still there, beneath the surface. But something had changed. They were no longer active. They were no longer trying to rise. The memory showed Varanthi scientists studying the planet from afar. Their readings made no sense. The Beneath Ones were still present, still vast, still powerful. But they had stopped. We did not understand at first, the first witness said. We assumed the creatures had simply gone back to sleep. But then we began to intercept human communications. We began to study their history, their mythology, their stories. Corinth watched as records of human history played before her. She saw cave paintings depicting dark creatures beneath the earth. She saw ancient texts describing battles with things that had no form. She saw generation after generation of humans passing down knowledge of the darkness below. They knew, she said. The humans knew about the Beneath Ones. They did more than know, the first witness replied. They fought. For 100,000 years, humans fought the Beneath Ones. Every generation, the creatures would try to rise, and humans would drive them back. They developed weapons we cannot understand. They learned secrets about the creatures that we never discovered in our brief encounter. They built containment systems that have held for millennia. The memory showed a final image, a deep cave somewhere on Earth. In it, humans stood guard over a darkness that seemed to stretch forever. They were not running. They were not afraid. They were simply waiting, watching, ready. We fled from the Beneath Ones in days, the first witness said. Humans have been fighting them for longer than our recorded history. They have not merely survived, they have won again and again and again. The memory faded, and Corinth found herself back in the vault. She was trembling. Now you understand, the first witness said. We do not fear Earth because of what lives there. We fear Earth because of what humans have done. No species should be capable of what they have accomplished. No species should be able to stand against the chaos of the old universe and win. What does it mean? Corinth asked. What are humans? The first witness was silent for a long moment. I have had 60 million years to consider that question, he finally said. I have only one answer. Humans are the species that refuse to accept the existence of things they could not defeat. When faced with impossible horrors, they did not run. They did not hide. They decided that the impossible would become possible. He turned to leave the vault. That is why we fear them, Ambassador. Not because of their weapons or their technology. We fear them because they looked at the oldest, most terrible things in existence and decided those things would learn to be afraid of humans. And did they? Corinth asked. Did the beneath ones learn to fear humanity? The first witness paused at the door. Go to Earth, he said. Find out for yourself, but be prepared for the answer. Because I suspect the truth is darker and stranger than either of us can imagine. Corinth watched him disappear into the shadows of the vault. She thought about what she had seen. She thought about a species that had spent 100,000 years at war with cosmic horrors. She thought about how humans smile so easily, laugh so freely, love so deeply, as if they had looked into the abyss and decided that joy was the best weapon against the dark. She would go to Earth. She would find the truth, and she was beginning to suspect that the truth would change everything. Corinth's ship entered Earth's atmosphere under a false identification code. She had not requested permission from the Varanthi Council for this mission. She knew they would have refused. Earth was forbidden territory, and no amount of diplomatic necessity would change that. But Corinth needed answers. She needed to see the truth with her own eyes. The planet was beautiful from orbit. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds swirling in patterns shaped by wind and weather. It looked peaceful. It looked safe. It looked nothing like a world that housed ancient horrors beneath its surface. She landed in a remote area far from any major cities. Her plan was to observe quietly, to gather information without drawing attention. That plan lasted approximately 4 hours. A human vehicle approached her landing site. It was black, unmarked, and moved with purpose. Corinth considered fleeing, but something told her that running would only make things worse. Two humans emerged from the vehicle. They wore dark suits and expressions that gave away nothing. One was a tall woman with silver hair. The other was a younger man with watchful eyes. Ambassador Corinth, the woman said. It was not a question. My name is Director Sarah Okonkwo. I represent a branch of Earth's unified government that officially does not exist. We have been expecting you. Corinth felt a chill run through her. How did you know I was coming? Because you are not the first Varanthi to visit Earth in secret, Director Okonkwo replied. Over the past 10,000 years, we have detected approximately 200 unauthorized Varanthi vessels entering our system. They always come to observe. They always leave with more questions than answers. You have been watching for us? We watch for everything. The director gestured toward the vehicle. Please, Ambassador, we have much to discuss, and I suspect you have questions that have haunted your species for millions of years. Let us provide some answers. The drive took them deep into a mountain range. They passed through security checkpoints that seemed to multiply the further they went. Finally, they entered a tunnel that led straight down into the earth. Where are we going? Corinth asked. We call this facility Basement 1, Director Okonkwo said. It is the oldest continuously operating human installation on Earth. It has been active, in one form or another, for approximately 90,000 years. Corinth processed this information. 90,000 years. Most galactic civilizations did not last that long. The tunnel opened into a vast underground chamber. Corinth saw humans working at stations filled with equipment she did not recognize. Screens displayed data in languages she could not read. And everywhere she looked, there were symbols. Ancient symbols carved into the walls, painted on the floors, embedded in every surface. What is this place? This is the Central Command Center for Subsurface Entity Management, Director Okonkwo explained. Or as it was known in older times, the Watch, humanity's first and most important duty. She led Corinth to a viewing window that looked out over an even larger chamber below. What Corinth saw there made her heart stop. Darkness, but not empty darkness. Living darkness. It moved and shifted and reached toward the lights above, like a drowning creature reaching for air. And in that darkness, she could see shapes, shapes that changed, shapes that should not exist. The beneath ones, still here, still alive, still trying to rise. You contain them, Corinth whispered. We do more than contain them, Director Okonkwo said. We study them. We understand them. We have learned their weaknesses and their patterns. Every generation of humans has added to our knowledge, and every generation has held the line. But how? The Varanthi could not even slow them down. Our weapons were useless. Director Okonkwo turned to face her. Your weapons were designed for physical enemies. The beneath ones are not physical in the way you understand. They exist in the spaces between reality. They feed on fear and chaos. They grow stronger when they are fought with force alone. Then how do you fight them? With will, the director said simply. With belief, with the absolute refusal to accept their existence as permanent. Your species fled because you believed the beneath ones could not be defeated. Humanity won because we never believed that. She pressed a button on her console. The view shifted, showing different chambers throughout the facility. Each one contained a fragment of the darkness, carefully isolated and monitored. We did not defeat them all at once, Director Okonkwo continued. The first generation simply survived. They learned which sounds drove the creatures back into the earth. They discovered that fire and light could create barriers. They found that certain places were safer than others. Over thousands of years, we developed better methods. We learned to speak their language, if you can call it that. We built containment systems that use their own nature against them. We created weapons that attack not their bodies, but their very concept of existence. Corinth stared at the viewing window. Your mythology, she said slowly. The stories humans tell about monsters. They are not fiction. They are training manuals, Director Okonkwo confirmed, passed down through every generation, hidden in plain sight. Every culture that has ever existed on Earth has known about the darkness below. Every culture has contributed to our defense. Why have you not told the galaxy about this? Would you have believed us? The director's smile was sad. We are the youngest species in the galactic community. We have only been traveling the stars for a few centuries. If we announced that we had been fighting cosmic horrors since before your species existed, would anyone have taken us seriously? Corinth had to admit she probably would not have. An alarm suddenly blared through the facility. Red lights flashed. Humans began moving with practiced efficiency, checking monitors and activating equipment. What is happening? Corinth asked. One of them is testing its containment, Director Okonkwo said calmly. It happens every few weeks. Please observe. Through the viewing window, Corinth watched as the darkness in one of the chambers surged upward. It pressed against invisible barriers, trying to expand, trying to escape. She could feel its hunger even through the glass, a terrible emptiness that wanted to consume everything. Human response teams arrived within minutes. They did not carry weapons that Corinth recognized. Instead, they carried devices that emitted specific frequencies of light and sound. They spoke words in a language that hurt Corinth's ears to hear. They moved in patterns that seemed random, but must have held some deeper meaning. The darkness recoiled. It pulled back from the barriers, retreating to the bottom of its chamber. The alarm stopped. The red lights turned green. Contained, a human technician reported. Thank you, Team 7, Director Okonkwo said. Standard surveillance for the next 48 hours. She turned back to Corinth. You see? This is what we do. This is what we have always done. While your species was watching galaxies form, we were learning how to make the impossible possible. But why? Corinth asked. Why did your ancestors not simply leave? Find another world, start fresh. Because we could not let them spread, the director said. If the beneath ones had consumed Earth, they would not have stopped there. They would have eventually found a way off this planet. They would have spread to other worlds, other systems, other galaxies. Everything would have been consumed. She looked at the contained darkness with something like respect. Our ancestors made a choice. They decided that some things were worth fighting for, even if the fight was endless. They decided that the universe was too precious to let the old chaos reclaim it. So they stayed, and they fought, and they passed that duty down to their children. Corinth thought about everything she had learned. She thought about the Varanthi fleeing in terror. She thought about humans choosing to stand and fight. "You are not the youngest species in the galaxy," she said slowly. "You might be the oldest warriors." Director Okonkwo smiled. "Perhaps we do not think of it that way. We simply think of it as what needs to be done. Someone has to hold the line against the dark. Someone has to remember that the universe is worth protecting. We chose to be that someone." The alarm sounded again. Another chamber, another test. The humans mobilized without fear, without hesitation. Corinth watched them work and understood something profound. The Varanthi had accumulated billions of years of knowledge. They had witnessed the birth of stars and the death of galaxies. But they had never learned what these young, fragile, short-lived humans had always known. Some things are worth fighting for. And some enemies can be defeated not by running, but by refusing to stop standing. The Great Hall of the Varanthi Council had never been so crowded. Representatives from 100 species had gathered to hear Ambassador Corinth's report. Word had spread through the galaxy that she had visited Earth, had seen its secrets, and had returned with information that would change everything. The first witness sat at the center of the council. He had not appeared in public since his conversation with the young explorer Thesic nearly a year ago. Now he watched Corinth with ancient eyes that held something new. Not fear, anticipation. Corinth stood at the speaker's platform. She looked out at the assembled beings, creatures who had built empires and conquered solar systems. They thought they understood the universe. They were wrong. "Honored representatives of the galactic community," she began, "I have spent 6 months on Earth. I have seen things that contradict everything we believed about that world and about the species that calls it home. What I am about to tell you is the truth, though it may be difficult to accept." She activated her data display. Images of Earth appeared, beautiful and peaceful. "We have always known that Earth was marked as forbidden on the oldest Varanthi charts. We knew that something terrible drove the Varanthi from that world 60 million years ago. What we did not know was that the things that scattered the oldest civilization in the galaxy are still there." Murmurs spread through the assembly. Some species shifted nervously. Others leaned forward with curiosity. The beneath ones, as the Varanthi called them, are beings from before the current universe. They exist in the spaces between physical laws. They cannot be killed by conventional means. They were the first inhabitants of Earth, and they remain there to this day. The murmurs grew louder. Corinth raised her hand for silence. "But they are no longer free. They are contained. They are controlled. And they are contained and controlled by humans." Now the assembly erupted. Representatives shouted questions and objections. How could this be possible? Humans were barely a spacefaring species. They lived less than a century. They had only recently discovered faster-than-light travel. The first witness rose from his seat. The chamber fell silent. "Let her continue," he said. His voice carried weight that silenced every objection. Corinth bowed to him and continued. "For approximately 100,000 years, humanity has waged an unending war against the Beneath Ones. Every generation has fought. Every generation has sacrificed. They have developed weapons and containment systems that we cannot begin to understand, and they have won. Not completely, not permanently, but consistently, they have held the line against the oldest darkness in existence." She changed the display. Now the assembly saw recordings from Basement 1. They saw the contained fragments of darkness. They saw human teams responding to containment breaches. They saw 90,000 years of records, carefully preserved. "This is why humans have no fear of the dark," Corinth said. "This is why they travel through space so easily. This is why they seem so comfortable with danger and death. They have already faced the worst things in existence. Everything else seems manageable by comparison." Elder Voranth spoke up. "Why have they kept this secret? Why not tell the galaxy what they protect us all from?" "Because they did not think we would believe them," Corinth said. "And honestly, would we have? A species younger than most of our oldest buildings claiming to have defeated cosmic horrors? We would have laughed at them." She looked around the chamber. "But there is more. The Beneath Ones are growing more active. Human scientists believe it is because of increased galactic activity in the region. More ships, more communications, more presence. The things that sleep beneath Earth are becoming aware that there is more beyond their prison. Fear rippled through the assembly. The Varanthi remembered what those things had done to them. Other species had heard the stories, passed down through millennia of whispered warnings. Humanity has a request to make of the galactic community, Corin said. The chamber went completely silent. They do not ask for help. They do not ask for weapons or soldiers or resources. They have been doing this alone for 100,000 years, and they can continue doing it alone if necessary. She paused, letting the weight of that sink in. What they ask for is acknowledgement. They want the galaxy to know what they have done and what they continue to do. They want other species to understand why Earth must remain protected, why human ships are always allowed to return home, why no one must ever again disturb what sleeps beneath that world. And they offer something in return? A human ambassador entered the chamber. She was young by human standards, perhaps 30 years old. But she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had looked into the abyss and walked away stronger. "My name is Ambassador Chen Wei," she said. Her voice was calm and clear. "I am here on behalf of Earth and all humanity. For 100,000 years, we have protected this galaxy alone. We do not regret this. It is who we are. But we believe the time has come for others to learn what we know." She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of beings far older and more powerful than herself. The Beneath Ones are not unique. There are other prisons throughout the universe, other places where the old chaos was sealed away. Someday, somewhere, someone will wake something that should have been left sleeping. When that day comes, they will have two choices: run or fight. We offer to teach you how to fight. The chamber erupted again. Species argued among themselves. Some were terrified at the idea that more such creatures existed. Others were intrigued by the possibility of learning human secrets. The first witness raised his hand once more. Silence fell. "For 60 million years," he said slowly, "the Varanthi have carried the shame of our retreat from Earth. We were the oldest species in the galaxy, and we ran from something that a primitive species would later learn to defeat. We have avoided humanity because we could not bear to face what they represented, a courage we did not have." He turned to look at Ambassador Chen Wei. "On behalf of the Varanthi, I thank you. Thank you for protecting a galaxy that did not know it needed protection. Thank you for fighting a war that we were too afraid to join. And thank you for offering to share your knowledge so that our shame might someday become strength." He bowed. It was the first time in recorded history that a Varanthi elder had bowed to another species. Ambassador Chen Wei returned the bow. "We do not offer this knowledge to make you ashamed of the past. We offer it so that you can face the future. The universe is vast and old and full of things that should not exist. But we have learned something important over the past 100,000 years." She smiled. And in that smile was all the fierce joy of a species that had learned to make the darkness afraid. "The impossible only stays impossible until someone decides otherwise. We decided that the Beneath Ones could be contained, and they were contained. We decided that humanity would survive, and humanity survived. You can make the same choice. You can decide that fear does not have to be the end of the story." In the viewing galleries, Thesic watched the proceedings with awe. He had started all of this with his petition to explore the Sol system. Now he was witnessing history being made. He thought about what Ambassador Chen Wei had said. The impossible only stays impossible until someone decides otherwise. Humans were not the oldest species in the galaxy. They were not the most technologically advanced. They did not have the longest lifespans or the most powerful weapons. But they had something the Varanthi had never possessed: the absolute refusal to accept defeat. Deep beneath the surface of Earth, in chambers older than human civilization, things vast and terrible pressed against their cages. They had been pressing for 100,000 years. They would press for 100,000 more. And above them, human guards stood watch. They did not flinch. They did not fear. They simply waited as their ancestors had waited, as their descendants would wait. This was what humanity did. This was what they had always done. They held the line against the dark. And now at last, the galaxy knew why. The Varanthi had spent 60 million years avoiding Earth because of its darker secret. Now they understood that the darker secret was not the things that lurked below. The darker secret was that humanity had looked at the oldest nightmares in existence and decided those nightmares would learn to fear them instead. And the nightmares had learned. The first witness smiled for the first time in 10,000 years. Perhaps he thought it was not too late for the rest of the galaxy to learn as well.